Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I am your venerable host Orochi, and today we are going to talk about the only thing that really matters: dragons. Specifically, dragons in the Pathfinder 2 game setting, and even more specifically, today we're talking about the Dragon Mage archetype. Available at level 2, like all archetypes, all starter archetypes are. But this one gives, like, basic... It doesn't even... Like, the basic feat just gives you some cantrips. And the training and spell DC and all that stuff. The basics of any spellcasting dedication. That's all it gives you. Whereas the Ravager one ups your damage die for your attacks, and it just does so much more than this. But I think all spellcasting is very weak in Pathfinder 2, so just giving somebody cantrips is virtually useless, because cantrip damage scaling is very poor compared to the obscene stuff good marshals can do. And that's probably a thing I will do another video on at some point, is the disparity I feel in class balance, which is hilarious because Pathfinder 2 is a hell of a lot better balanced than 5e, but there's still a lot of problems. And you kind of wonder, why are there so many problems? But I'll get into that at another time. For today, we're just looking over Dragon Mage, because this has some of the best feats in it I have seen in Pathfinder. Now, the last video you might have noticed, when we got to level 20 and we found that humdinger of a water feat, just wow, that was amazing. And we will get similar here when we get down there. But it's unfortunate that more feats can't be that impressive. And I often wonder, like, why are there so many lackluster feats that can't really be, even if taken to their extreme with a very lenient GM and you're just building to hyper specialize and doing this one thing, they still don't get, like, fantastic, which I think is a problem. But unfortunately for Dragon Mage, you have to start at the bottom, because you're either going to be a marshal, because let's face it, if you want to pretend to be a dragon, you're going to be a martial base and then take this as an addition to get some spell casting. Because there is no dragon in any of the books that has the proficiencies of a spellcaster. They're all fighters. All monsters are fighters, therefore all dragons are fighters. Therefore, even if you make a martial dragon character, if they're not a fighter, they're weaker than all other dragons, just by the way that the system works, which is hyper frustrating to me. It's just, And if you want to make a pure spellcasting dragon, you're going to be so far behind in physicality that you're not really going to have the feel of being a dragon, in my opinion. I remember back in Council of Worms, 2nd edition D&D, where they had that same split, where you could be a fighter dragon or a mage dragon, and mage dragons were noticeably weaker, but they still had decent melee capabilities. And I think that's one of the things that 5e does relatively well, is that spellcasters can still use weapons. They just don't have class abilities on top of that make them better at it. But I think the downside for 5e is that all their spells are also super freaking ridiculous. So unless you're making one of the few martial builds that is also ridiculous, spellcasters just easily outperform. Here, you will not have that problem. because spells in general are pretty terrible. And for a good ways down, Dragon Mage does not give you really any of those like really awesome things. I note that I have not yet. This will be the first time I look at all of the heritage specific feats, so we might again be surprised like we were with the tidal wave feat. It's also interesting to note that Dragon Mage is compared to Dragon Ravager, it's the only one to have a level 2 feat. So if you're using free archetype, you can take Dragon Mage at level 2 and also take a free archetype of Dragon Mage to get cantrip expansion. There's no reason to do that, because unless there's some cantrips that you desperately want, which I can't imagine that would ever be the case, but it is possible. Whereas when you look at the die-hard archetype, it gives you Dragon Ravager at level 1, and there are no level 2 Dragon Ravager feats, so if you're using free archetype, you've just lost a feat. I find that bizarre, but when we get into die-hards, we will cover that. But I don't think this is very good. Cantrips are really bad. Like, they should be vast. Not only should the damaging cantrips be either more powerful or just do more things, but also the cantrips that are just like prestidigitation and stuff. It's just like, let it do everything. Let it do so much more, because your magic is so damn weak. It's just like, why do these things exist? Then we move down, level 4, we have basic spellcasting. It says basic Dragon Mage spellcasting, but all it does is give you the basic spellcasting capabilities, which are in the core rulebook. Every casting multi-class archetype gives that to you. The only thing that's interesting about this is it only gives you the spell tradition that is of your heritage. So that makes choosing a heritage as a dragon so complex, because you have to factor out what extra attack you want, what energy type you want, what extra free stat you could take other than strength for your first level boost. It also determines, what spellcasting tradition you have. There's so much wrapped up in your heritage other than, hey, how does it look? How does it feel? What's the flavor? There's so many mechanics tied into it as well. And even additional feats that you can get. Like Dragon Ravager has the huge problem of there's only 6 or 8 dragons that can get Bite of Opportunity, and another 6 that can get the Wing Deflection one, and only Imperial dragons can get the I think Twisting Tail, and they're the only ones who can get the Flurry that does a grapple. And there's a lot of things that go into choosing what heritage you want. It's very interesting, and it's kind of unfortunate that for a new player, a lot of people say that, this, that, and the other thing, like free archetype is too many choices for new players and stuff. And I'm like, if you're using Path Builder 2, like we are right here, I will tell you, no, it's not. I cannot imagine someone so stupid that they could not just pick up Path Builder and make even a half-decent character. It is almost impossible not to, because the game is built around, as long as you have a good stat in your primary class stat, you're good. Your character will not be absolute garbage. So as long as you tell somebody that, it's like, yeah, just make sure that your class stat, when you go under your ability boost at first level, it tells you what your class stat is. Just tell them, make sure you have that 18 and you're good. Like, there's not enough complexity to break people's brains in this. There's just not. Like, and I would even say especially because of the way Path Builder streamlines first level character building. I would say Pathfinder's first level character building is probably the easiest out of any D20 game derived from Dungeons and Dragons ever, since probably like first edition. Like even in second edition, when you get nothing from your class, it's still pretty much easier in Pathfinder 2 with Path Builder to make a character. It's just so damn easy, and there's not really a lot of choices. And if you make a bad choice, you can retrain. So it's literally not a problem. If anybody's getting analysis paralysis, you just tell them, hey, it's cool. You can retrain. That's fine. But you can't retrain your heritage. So making a dragon character for a new player, that is a problem. I don't think it's a bad problem. You can just say that dragons are definitely an advanced thing to play, and it requires a lot of system mastery to get into all the options that you might want available, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. But it's definitely interesting. Then we move on. Breath of the Dragon. I think both of... Yeah, it says prerequisites Dragon Ravager, but Mages get it too. Right? I didn't do something wrong here, right? No. It's all saying Ravager. I didn't take Ravager, nor did I have... We have Mage. Did I mess something up? I do not believe so. I don't need any of this stuff filled out to choose my feats. But let's do so just because there might be a loophole. Because Path Builder isn't perfect. There are minor bugs and problems. Shape change. If we're going Gold Dragon, we gotta take shape change. That's just a thing. The rest of that we do not need. We have Dragon Mage. We do not have Ravager. So we should not have Ravager options popping up. Because that'll make this into like an 8-hour video. I'm not going over all that stuff again. Alright. Yeah, it's including all the Ravager things. Why? Why are you doing that? It didn't do that when I had... when I was going through the Ravager. So why would it do that now? Damn thing is ruining my video. Yeah, none of the Mage stuff is coming up here. Well, I guess I will just have to be extra careful of the things that we look over. And skip all the stuff we've already done. More work for me. Yay. That just means that you don't get to boost up your damage with it. But you counterspell instead, which I think is pretty terrible because of the limitations of it. You have to have the same spell. It's like, what's the chances that you're going to have the same spell somebody else is casting? It's like, that's not going to happen. Not often enough to take a feat for it. Gossip lore. for amber dragons. You spread and collect so much gossip that you know something about everything, even if some of what you know isn't exactly accurate. Get trained in gossip lore. I love that they can just add lore skills to literally anything. Any word in the alphabet, it's got a lore attached to it, because they can. It's super cool. Special lore skill that you can only use to recall knowledge, but on any topic. So it basically works like bardic knowledge. If you fail with gossip lore, you get the effects of dubious knowledge skill feat. So you get a little mix of correct and false information, but only false on a critical failure. So that immediately is better than regular recall knowledge. If you have legendary proficiency in society, you gain expert proficiency. Yes, this literally works exactly like bardic knowledge, except for it's keyed off from society instead of occult. That is super awesome. And it makes it so that even when you fail a recall knowledge check, you still get 50-50 correct and incorrect knowledge, which is better than getting either nothing. A good GM will give you, a tidbit, probably a piece of knowledge that's not innately useful to you immediately. I'll say that. And then nothing else for bad. Or if you're playing in a more strict kind of game, they would give you, like one of the saves or one of the weaknesses, and then also tell you a save or weakness that is wrong. And that's pretty good for a failure. You still get something, even if one of those things might actually waste your time. So I like that a lot. That's pretty cool. And the bardic knowledge ability on bards, you have to pick it up as a feat, and there's only one muse that gives it to you, but it's pretty good because you can just use it for all knowledge. Like, no other class is anywhere near as good as bard at knowing a little bit about literally everything, because the way lore skills work in this is that, if you can find whatever problem you just say, oh, well, I know a little bit about this exact specific thing. Like, you could go halfway around the world to an ancient temple of a forgotten species or whatever. It's like, oh, well, I know about this. I read it in a book somewhere. or with this feat, it's like, oh, I heard a guy who was from this area once, like years ago. And you can just choose, the lore that is specifically pertaining to this, which tells the GM, hey, well, you have to give the character a lower DC because they have specific knowledge about this thing, which is excellent. For being only 4th level, this is ridiculously powerful, because the problem with the bardic knowledge and gossip lore is that it does not scale well. You have to be legendary in society, which means level 14, to get expert proficiency in gossip lore. That means you're just going to be trained until level 13 or 14. That's real bad. At level 7, when everybody else gets master, at level 2, when everybody else gets expert, you're still only going to be trained. But the difference in DC that you should get easily offsets your trained versus everyone's expert. The problem comes in when you're only trained and everyone else is master, then you, depending upon your GM, you might be equal or slightly behind. But that's still fantastic that even if you are behind, even if you are getting penalized basically versus on level stuff, if you roll a failure, you're still getting something useful. It's just super good. I don't know if anybody would play an Amber Dragon, though. That I know of, anyway. That's not saying much, but... Ooh. Nirvana's Redeemer. For Bliss Dragons, you soothe all those who are hurt who come to your sanctuary, except those who will use that healing to harm others. You get Lay on Hands. That's pretty freaking amazing. There's an entire archetype dedicated to getting Lay on Hands. You can refocus by meditating. That's great. That's one of the problems I sort of have with focus points, is that every unique class or archetype or whatever that gives focus points has a tells you a specific way that you can regain those focus points. And it ranges anywhere from sorcerers, who just give it back automatically without even having to do anything. They just automatically refocus as a bonus free action activity over 10 minutes, so they can literally do anything else, up to, like, what was it, one of the new necromancer classes. The only way to refocus is to contemplate the dead over a grave. Like, in a usual adventuring day, if you have 3 fights and you need to refocus 3 times, where the hell are you going to find graves to go and just refocus on? It's like, that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. I mean, unless you're with a permissive GM who says, hey, yeah, all you have to do is dig a hole and bury one of the things you killed, and I'll count that as a grave. Like, but that's still work, digging a hole and stuff. I would say that's, takes you 20 minutes to bury a body and then refocus over it, instead of taking 10 minutes like pretty much everybody else. So it's a little bit of a problem. It's a thing that should be completely flavor, but some of them actually have a lot of mechanics tied into them, and that can be a problem. But this one's good. You just meditate. So that's awesome. So this feat literally just gives you Lay on Hands. That's it. Like, that is... If that's something you want, that's an amazingly low cost for Lay on Hands. Because the only other ways to get Lay on Hands is to take a champion archetype or take Blessed One archetype. Like, those are the only ways to get Lay on Hands. And this is just like, oh, if you're going Dragon Mage because you want more spells or some of the meta magic stuff in here, if you're a Bliss Dragon, you can also pick up Lay on Hands because you're just awesome. It's super good. Lay on Hands is a great heal spell. Talisman Keeper. Occult Dragons. You keep a startling collection of esoteric talismans around at all time. You gain Talisman Dabbler. Oh, you gain the Talisman Dabbler dedication feat and can select feats from the Talisman Dabbler archetype, even if you haven't taken enough Dragon Mage feats to get out of the feat. Wow. On the one hand, mechanically what this is doing is freaking amazing. But on the other hand, Talisman Dabbler is a pretty terrible archetype because talismans are garbage. Absolute freaking garbage. They're supposed to fill a niche of cheap consumables, but why would you ever spend money or actions or time on garbage consumables that have one-time use that don't do much? They barely do anything. And it's like, just sell it for money. They're so bad. I hate them with a passion because talismans fail hard at the thing that they're trying to do. Which I have some homebrew rules for those, which I will put out eventually. I want to make a collection of all my homebrew ideas, which I will put out at some point. And talismans are in there. This is only for Ravager. Here we go. Bespell Claw. This is the exact same thing that several spellcasting archetypes get, because a few, I don't remember off the top of my head how many, but I think Wizard, Sorcerer, and Cleric all get Bespell Weapon, where it's like when you cast a spell from a spell slot, you get bonus damage to your melee. that sounds cool, but this is hot garbage. Hot absolute garbage. Because A, spells generally, any good spell costs 2 actions. So that means you have 1 action left to make a melee strike, because this is a free action. That means when you cast a spell, you have to be in melee with somebody, which if they have attack of opportunity, well, you're going to get punched in the face, and your the damage from a spell weapon could easily be 5 times higher than it is, and it would still not really put you in an area where you're vying for damage with a martial. So it's just real bad. Like, if you're in a really good party as some sort of battle cleric or something, then it wouldn't be bad, but I don't know. This is going to be a running theme here where a lot of the spellcaster stuff I don't think is very good. It's Ravager. Elysian Performer for Havoc Dragons. You perform inspirational magic with the power of Elysium, granting you a little occult magic, particularly if it's related to auditory or visual effects. You can add a single common occult spell or other occult spell to which you have access to your Dragon Mage spell list, and can choose to learn that spell in addition to the usual spells from the Divine list, because Havoc Dragons get Divine spells. Alternatively, you can add 3 such spells from the occult list instead of 1, as long as each of the 3 spells has 1 or more of the auditory, sonic, or visual traits. Alright, here we go. Mixed opinion on this one. For a feat, a 6th level feat, what you're getting for this is really, really bad. It's just not the kind of stuff that I view as powerful for casters. On the other hand, being a caster and being able to poach spells from other spell lists is, even if they're not great spells, because very few spells are great in this system, that still massively broadens your capabilities, which is excellent. So, if you and the value of this feat grows the more spells they put out. So, every time an amazing spell gets put out that you can steal and put into your list with this, the more powerful this feat gets. So that's really cool. I mean, adding occult spells to the Divine list is going to be fantastic, because occult spells will do lots of cool debuffs and some will damage and stuff, whereas Divine is mostly heals and alignment-based garbage. So it could give you some actual good debuffs and some decent damage and effects. So it's really good. Infernal Aid for Infernal Dragons. You call upon the power of hell to assist you, summoning devils to fight for your cause. You can cast Summon Lesser Servitor to summon a devil, and nothing else. As you continue to gain levels and gain expert and master spellcasting benefits, the extra spell slot increases in level to match the highest spell slot you can cast from the archetype. Nice. This gives you, what, 1? Yeah. 1 additional spell slot of your highest level to cast Summon Lesser Servitor to summon a devil. That's pretty cool. Gotta know, summoning sucks hard in Pathfinder 2. Like, really bad. Especially as you gain levels. Because by the time you hit level 10... Actually, no. When you hit level 13, all your summons are going to be at -7 compared to a martial compared to a fighter for attacks, and -5 for saves and AC, and that just puts them into near auto crit territory. And so it's the kind of thing where, like, you really have to temper your expectations, because if you summon something, spend 3 actions, summon a creature, and it dies in a round, by the game standard, that's a good round for you, because you wasted enough of the enemy's actions to get your thing killed. But I think for nearly everybody who wants to summon something, that's not good enough. Like, when you're summoning something, you want it to stick around for a few rounds. But it's not going to be able to hit anything because it's got at least between a -5 and a -7 to hit. And so you can build around them to make them decent, but they're never going to be good. And that's what sort of sucks. And you always have to cast them at your highest level, or else they're even farther behind. And also, since you only get new spells every other level, that means every odd level you're getting a new servitor, whereas every even level, the servitor you have is falling an extra point behind in their all their rolls and DCs. And that feels really, really bad. But otherwise, an auto-scaling spell slot is pretty freaking great. So if you can work around all those negatives, this is actually pretty cool. But you have to be an Infernal Dragon, which means you're probably evil, and you're summoning evil, so this isn't probably going to see much use. But it's cool. Come on. Oh, it's a Ravager. Majestic spell. This is basically... it's a meta magic that allows you to completely and absolutely, without the GM's approval, reflavor your spell to be whatever the hell you want. You can say, it's like, oh, my fireball comes out as a sprinkle of water and then explodes as a fireball. And that makes it so that other creatures cannot detect are harder to detect what spell you are casting and counter it. And then you can also intimidate creatures after you cast a spell to the end of your next turn, which isn't really what you want. You want to intimidate before you cast a spell so that then they have less chance to resist it. But it's still, that's pretty cool. It's just like, hey, you're a dragon. You can literally reshape magic to your will. And that's awesome. It doesn't change anything about the spell except for how it looks. So if you're playing in a game where you get to describe your spells every time you cast them, pick this up. It's just cool. Unless, your GM is literally already allowing you to do all this stuff, and then it's kind of useless. I mean, identifying spells and countering them is so freaking hard, and it's so complex that's just like, it's not worth it for players. But if you finding a lot of enemies are counteracting your stuff, then you probably desperately need this -2 circumstance bonus, because it's a penalty to the enemies recalling figuring out what spell you're doing, and checks to counteract. So it's anywhere from amazing to required, depending upon what group you're in, or just absolutely useless. And I don't inherently think that's a problem, because that means it's pretty damn good in the situations where you want it. Super flavorful if you want that flavor, or you just won't have use for it, so don't take it. A lot of feats need more of that to be very useful. When they're useful, have a little bit of, hey, this is a cool thing that you can make use of all the time, but it is niche, so you might not take it with every build. Mentalist Counterspell for Sovereign Dragons. It's a reaction, which is fantastic because casters do not get a lot of reaction options. And the trigger is a creature you're observing with 120 feet casts a mental spell. So right off the bat, 120 feet is ridiculous for a range, but it's only mental spells, which are actually kind of few and far between. Like, a lot of occult spells are probably going to be in there, but otherwise, not a lot. Although, also some of the most party TPK worthy spells are going to be mental. Like Dominate, Charm Person, all of those really, hey, save or suck, save or get fucked kind of spells. Those are usually mental spells. Because losing control of what you're doing, confuse, and all that kind of stuff, that's all mental. So having the ability to just, no mental spells, none of that. Because this allows you to counteract them. You can attempt to counteract the triggering spell using a spell slot or prepared spell slot you expended to determine the counteract level and counteract check modifier. The one issue I have with this is that it says it has to be a mental spell, but how do you know it's a mental spell? Like, do you need to know it's a mental spell? That's the big question. Because it just says you can use this ability if they're casting a mental spell. So this is either going to be fantastic because you can just do it, or it's literally going to be impossible to do because you have to use a reaction to identify the spell in the first place, and you don't get 2 reactions. So it seems the answer is, you just do it, which is freaking fantastic. This is just a, hey, as long as I have a spell of every slot available to me, I can just snuff out any mental freaking control effects anybody wants to do within 120 feet. That is so damn good. Just absolutely fantastic. Oh, Nirvana's Mercy. Requires Nirvana's Redeemer, which I think is the one that gives you Lay on Hands. Yes. If you cast... This is a meta magic that changes your Lay on Hands to counteract fear and paralyzed. Like, counteracting fear is pretty pointless. Because the most potent... most fear effects are just going to boil down to doing frightened, which goes away every turn. I mean, if you have no fighters or champions in your group, then you might need some of that. But having a fighter in your group, they automatically get bonus to their saves, like 1 tier better on saves versus fear, and champions automatically reduce the fear of all allies around them with an aura that they can pick up. So this is maybe all right. Like, the fear effect is kind of garbage, but paralyzed, man, when you get paralyzed, that is one of those things that will screw you. Ran into a bunch of, what was it? Crap, I don't remember. It wasn't ghouls, was it? And it wasn't wights. It might have been ghouls. We were low level, but basically had a TPK against paralyzed because half our party was paralyzed for multiple rounds. It's just like, oh, well, I can't do anything this round. And that's bad. But you're going to get this one use of this to get rid of the paralyzed, and you know, most of the things that are going to paralyze you are probably going to be able to keep reapplying it. At least the scariest things. Otherwise, if it's just a spell, then yeah, this is awesome. You can clear paralyzed. That's good. I'm not sure it's use 6th level feat good, but getting rid of paralyzed, it's one of those things that's like, man, when you need it, it's real good. But most of the time, you don't really need it. If this had like one, I guess the fear effect cleansing is probably their, you know, olive branch ability, their like ribbon-esque kind of ability on this. So yeah, it's good. I just think that fear effect cleansing it's an automatic thing. So why would you spend actions getting rid of it unless you could get rid of the whole thing? But this kind of does that. So it's good. Not great, but it's good. It's Ravager again. Steady spellcasting. If you would get disrupted by a reaction, aka if you get attack of opportunity, get a DC 15 flat check to keep your spell. That's really garbage. Like, a DC 15 is really bad. Like, it should be DC 11 or something, like a 50-50. Why would you take a feat that only gives you a 25% chance to keep your spell when you get crit hit? Because you're a caster. Usually. If you're taking all this stuff, you're probably a caster. If not, then you're not getting, you know, a ton of extra spells or whatever. But this goes for all the classes that have steady spellcasting in their class. Because actually, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, and Wizard. Like, all those classes get hosed because of these rules. Because they're all squishy as fuck. These classes die to a stiff wind. Because they're going to have, like, somewhere between 70 to 50% of the health of an actual freaking martial. They've got lower saves, tend to have lower AC. They're just crit magnets with low health. They're gonna go down. So the way that you get interrupted with an attack of opportunity is if it crit hits you. So you're going to be taking an enormous size of your health is going to be reduced by this hit. And then you only have a 25% chance to keep your spell because you specifically took a feat to give you the chance to have your spell. Like, that's a feel-bad kind of thing. It's like, hey, I specialized in doing this thing, but it only works a fourth of the time. It's like, that's dumb. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's just dumb. Like, when people take things, they want them to work. If your thing doesn't work most of the time, then what the fuck is the point? It's like, yeah, cool, you got a crit hit on the caster. That crit hit, the damage on it alone is enough to be worth what you did. Never mind interrupting their damn spell. And it's not like I'm asking like a 5 flat check either. It's like 11 would be good. But just more, like when people argue about how powerful spellcasters are in Pathfinder 2, it usually just boils down to, it's like, oh, spellcasters were so strong in every other edition, and now they're just balanced now. That's good. And the opposite argument is, well, these spells feel bad, they suck, and that's it. It's like, no, I can make a laundry list of all the things about casters that make them feel like garbage. And it's just no one thing. It's just tons of little things that pile up, and it's just like, I can't play casters. I can't do it now. They're just so bad. Ravager. Vital Radiance for Solar Dragons. You channel the power of the star in order to heal allies and burn foes. Oh, geez. An extra spell slot of your highest level. Is everybody going to get one of these? Because that's awesome. Which you can cast heal. Oh, it makes you into a very, 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 very weakened cleric. That's friggin' amazing. Like, full stop. That's friggin' amazing. I don't know why solar dragons would get that. You'd think they would get some sort of, like, solar burst or something. But, hey, that's amazing. You get it at 6th level, which is kind of weird, but still. Max level heal, it's never a bad thing. Especially since you can put that on any class. Freaking awesome. Oh, Ravager. Breath magic. This is a meta magic, only it's free. Unlike a lot of other meta breath stuff. And you have to have, well, that's weird. You have to have breath, and it has to be in the shape of a cone or a line. So you can't use bursts with this. That's strange. And then this, I don't understand what this is doing. You use your breath to deliver the breath, to deliver your spell. Like, if you interpret this to mean that you do your breath damage and the spell damage, but that's not what you're doing. It says, if your next action is to cast a spell from your Dragon Mage spell slots, which means that they're also not going to be your highest level spell slots, and it has an area and has no duration, you can choose to change the spell's area to instead use the area of your breath weapon. If you do, use your breath to deliver the spell, so you can't use your breath again for 1d4 rounds, even if the spell replaces all the usual effects of Dragon Breath. I'm torn on this because it's not saying you're using your breath weapon, you're just delivering a spell by breathing. Like, if you're just casting if you're just changing the shape of the spell to match your breath weapon's normal shape, this is garbage. But it does put your breath weapon on cooldown. So if you say that this does breath weapon damage plus the spell, then this is great. Like, freaking amazing kind of great. Because it's a free action. So I think it would vary greatly depending on how your GM interprets this. Because it says you're casting a spell, but using your breath to deliver it. But that doesn't specifically say to me that you're using your breath weapon. I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of things in Pathfinder 2, they'll say something with the same words, but you can tell that they're not exactly meaning these words to be the game terms, like traits and stuff that they're related to. So it's kind of a maybe. This could be amazing, especially for 8th level. So ask your GM before taking this what they think of it, and you might have something that's awesome. Because it's a free action meta breath. So basically, every time your breath weapon is up, cast a spell. Well, if you have a cone. If you have a line, then you're screwed, because lines suck ass. Unless you want to be like a blue dragon or whatever, and cast a lightning bolt in your lightning breath so that your breath weapon just hits crazy friggin' hard. That would be awesome. But otherwise, I would say use cones. Cones are just the best. If this worked with the bursts, I would say those would definitely be the best. But sadly, it doesn't, so go with cone. Take this if you have a cone, and your GM allows you to do full breath damage. Because it also says if you have deep breath, you can choose to apply it to increase the area of your spell. But if you do so, you must wait that long before using deep again, as normal for deep breath. And because of that, it says it's just increasing the area of your spell, not the damage of your breath weapon. So, very, very up in the air about what this actually fully does. But if you get to deep breath and do your cone breath weapon damage at double damage because of deep breath, and also increase the area of your spell that you're casting, then this will put you up into actual, good levels of damage dealing, which is something casters don't often get at. So this could be amazing if you have a lenient GM. Because of the fact that this actually does two things that are deemed to be very good at damage at the same time, I would say there's probably a lot of GMs who would say, no, that's not what it does. It just changes the area of your spell, which would often be not that useful. But the trigger of it is just an area and has no duration. The issue is area. Most things that have an area are probably going to be the size of your breath weapon or bigger. So what benefit are you actually getting out of this? And that's kind of going to be the problem about this feat in general, is like, taken one way, it's virtually useless. Taken the other way, it's borderline pushing at the upper levels of power for a medium low level feat. So, yeah. Oh, Ravager. Draconic Absorption. This one is cool. You can absorb magic from your foe's spells when you completely avoid them and use it to recharge your own breath weapon. If you get a crit save on any saving throw against an enemy spell, you instantly recharge your breath weapon. It's just so good. Like, are you ever going to crit succeed on something and not get killed as a caster? Unless it's a will save? Probably not. But, hey, once you pick this feat up, use your breath weapon. Use it as fast and often as you can, because, especially if there's an enemy spellcaster around, because there is a chance, even if small, that you'll be able to instantly get it back. And that's cool. But this also gets into the problems of the Dragon Breath is generally crap anyhow, because it's low damage. Even when you maximize it with Ravager and Deep Breath, it's still not fantastic because it's a cone. And after the enemy has walked up to your party and maybe tried getting around your tanks to your squishies, where are you ever going to find the area to use your breath and hit multiple enemies and not hit friendlies? It's a logistical problem, and it's always going to be there just by the nature of how the game works. That's always going to be a problem. So breath weapons are innately far less useful than they otherwise would be just because of that. So it's a lot to take into consideration. But that is a cool feat. So is this one. Breath. You get one extra slot for everything except for your 2 highest levels. All multi-class spellcasting gets that, and it's good, because otherwise you kind of have crap spells. It's Ravager. Grave Breath for Etheric Dragons. That's Ravager too. I think this was the first feat that surprised me that there was basically a meta breath feat for Ravagers. Noise. Ravager. That's Ravager. Ravager. Oh, I hope this gets fixed soon. They should not be here. Conductive Scales. You can draw forth the magic through your magical pathways. You send the power surging through your scales, briefly granting you an increased protection. Whenever you cast a non-cantrip spell, you gain +1 status bonus to the beginning of your next turn. As a level 10 feat, this is pretty fucking garbage. Like, absolute fucking garbage. Like, that should be at least a +2. Because then it's like, hey, you raised a shield by casting a spell. That's cool as fuck. But no, you get the protection of a buckler on a class that's probably already squishy as fuck. Because you may or may not already have the 5 AC that you're supposed to have because you didn't max out your dex or whatever. Like, there's no reason this isn't a +2 bonus. There's none whatsoever. It's on a super squishy class. And even if a martial character took this archetype and took this feat, they still have to cast a spell from a slot. Which means, at best, they will find a weird one-action spell, like friggin' True Strike or some garbage, cast it to give themselves 1 AC, so then they can do 1 good attack or something. It's like, it's not fantastic. It's just not. I mean, I guess that would give them 1 AC and they can get 2 attacks. But I guess that's the big problem, is when you have stuff that anybody could take, you can't make it work well for the people who need it. Because then other people could pick it up. But whatever, I would still say +2. Because casters need it. Oh, more Ravager stuff. Enspelled Breath. Once per day. That sucks. You've delved into a powerful but draining move to use in dire situations, combining your breath with a spell to deliver this is the thing. You use your breath and at the same time use breath magic to cast a spell so you can do both damages. There we go. That clears it up, because breath magic by itself was not very clear. So breath magic is pretty terrible as a feat by itself. And this, because it's only once a day, is also garbage. If this was once an hour, and there might be a feat later, I don't remember, that might make this better, because I've never taken breath magic because it looks so bad. But if you could do this once per hour, ace. Costing 3 feats to do it? That's a little bit too much. A little bit way too much. But we shall see. Ravager. 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 Wow. Oh, it's going to be Ravager. All the auras are Ravager. Expert spellcasting. It's expert spellcasting. You know exactly what that is. Here we go. Here's one of the core reasons to take this archetype. Meta breath feat. Whether with burning flames, toxic clouds of poison, storming bolts descending from above, or swirling snowflakes, you can modify your breath weapon to leave behind a lingering area to damage those who dare to remain in its confines. If your next action is Dragon Breath, a lingering aftereffects remain in the area, dealing damage of the same type but half the number of damage dice as your Dragon Breath to creatures who end their turn in the area, with a basic reflex save for him. And it lasts for 1d4 rounds. But that 1d4 is the exact same number you roll to recharge your breath. So you will always, if you use this feat and this power before this meta breath, then your breath will always be in effect. It'll be either on the ground somewhere or ready for you to trigger that round. That is friggin' amazing. And at maximum potential, this allows you to multiply your damage by 5. 3. Because it does half each round. So if you're in a good party that has a lot of forced movement, or you're in small spaces and you're able to do stuff like Wall of Stone and stuff, then this is one of the best things to ever happen to a dragon spellcaster. And this is kind of the reason why I think even if you were a martial dragon, even if you're a martial dragon who takes Ravager, pick Dragon Mage up. Even if you're only going to take like 2 or 3 feats from this archetype, there are 3 feats in this archetype that are useful to everyone, and this is one of them. Everyone can get stupid awesome use out of this. Everyone. Because it doesn't matter what your class is. You can breathe out your breath weapon, and there's a fairly good chance that it's going to damage stuff. And you can make sure that your team works together to maximize that damage. Like, there's no downside to that whatsoever. It's just all great. Unless the enemy, unless the enemy does that to you, and then that would suck, because you can't turn it off. But, this is basically saying, your breath weapon is so good that you scar the area that you put it in, and it does continuous damage. It's so flavorful, so cool, and it's a significant power boost to your breath weapon, I believe, if you can make use of it. Magic resistance is Ravager. Magic sense. You can cast detect magic. This isn't really coded in here very well since it doesn't have... Well, I guess the requirements is all that, but it doesn't say Dragon Mage. Well, I guess that's archetype. This is like a 2nd level feat for most of these classes, I think. Or if you're trained in Arcana, you can pick it up as a skill feat. There's no reason in hell this is on the same level as Lingering Breath. None whatsoever. Do not pick this up. Manipulate Flames. Red Dragon only, but let's be clear here. Red Dragons have probably one of the most amazing abilities in Pathfinder 2 that they have never had in any other edition of Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know if they had it in first edition of Pathfinder, but when you read their stat block in the Bestiary and you get to their ability to manipulate flames, you're like, wait, what? No. Like, in a lot of ways, it's not a great ability because there aren't a whole lot of high-level fire spells specifically, but there are some, and red dragons can just take flame. They have absolute control of fire. You cast a upcasted fireball or like a volcano spell at them, they just go, oh, I just take control of that. It's mine now. And this gives you a little bit of that flavor. It's not a reaction like actual red dragons, which kind of sucks, but on your turn, you can spend an action to attempt to take control of a magical fire or a fire spell within 100 feet. And then if you succeed, then you get to... Control of it is transferred to you. And you can sustain it if you want, or choose to end it. Which means if you sustain it, you can do any of its sustain abilities. Like if somebody casts... This is a 12th level ability, so no idiot's going to do this, but if you have some stupid monster for that whatever reason has... not Circle of Flame, what is it? Rolling Fire? I think that's the name of the spell. Where they just create a ball of fire and roll around the ground to damage stuff. Like, you could just take that spell and when you sustain it, you get control of it, and you can move it back into the enemy's space. It is so cool. This is such a cool ability if you come across enemies who do magical fire effects, which probably isn't very often, but it's iconic as fuck. Overwhelming energy, it's decent. All these prime casters get it, so, you know. If you're not a caster who's getting it anyway, or if you got free archetype and want to get it with your archetype instead of from your class or whatever, then this is an option. Reflect spell. Only for crystal, lunar, or silver dragons. Opponent casting a spell that targets you critically fails a spell attack roll against your AC. You reflect your foe's pathetic spell back at them, using a combination of your reflective scales and your magical prowess. And then you get to do the spell attack back at them. If you come across enemies that are doing spell attacks at you, then this could be cool. And enemies are automatically much, much, much better at spell attacks than player characters are, so there's a real chance of that actually being a thing. But even so, they have to critically miss, which isn't likely to happen. So this is a bad feat, but if you have it and you're able to make use of it, it could feel really good. But then you have to attack back, which because you're a caster and casters' attack bonus with their spells is garbage, you're gonna miss. So this is a really cool and flavorful ability that just sucks. Just because of the math of the game, this sucks. If using this gave you a +2 AC bonus to turn it into a crit, and then gave you like a +2 or +3 bonus to hit, because that's how far behind casters are to marshals in their spell attack to hit through most of the levels, then this would be a really cool and on-power ability. But as is, it's not great. It's super interesting, but just mathematically not good. It almost seems like Ravager has more feats and cooler feats and more interesting things. It's sort of like casters are always a second thought for all Pathfinder developers. All of them, including Mark, which is sad. Really sad. Invoke Hell. For Infernal Dragons. Once a day, you tear a rift into hell and pull forth a raging storm of hellfire within 120 feet. All creatures in a 5-foot radius, 20-foot tall cylinder, which means one fucking creature, unless they're flying stacked on top of each other, take 3d6 evil damage, which is going to be nothing unless you're playing in an evil campaign where you're specifically going against creatures of good, which there aren't a whole lot of them, and 3d6 fire. Reflex save, and you can sustain it for up to a minute. And you can move it 20 feet when you sustain. That's good, at least. In a straight line, though, that sucks bad. Everything it moves through takes the damage. That's very bizarre. Most abilities like this don't do that. but it's a once-a-day thing, so maybe that's why. And the damage increases to 46 at 18th level. I'm going to say don't ever bother looking at this because there's so much wrong that's not going to be used here. You have to be evil. You have to be in an evil campaign fighting against good creatures. And even then, the damage is just so. And it's only once a day. It's a cool ability. And it has redeeming features. But no one's ever going to use that. But if you're playing in an evil game as an Infernal Dragon, yeah, pick that up. That's cool. This just says archetype. I wonder if Ravager and... No. Oh. It requires overwhelming energy, which is only for Dragon Mage. And this part kind of sucks. Your breath weapon has to deal acid, cold, electricity, fire, or sonic damage. So all the dragons out there who do mental damage, you can't do this. But it allows you to reduce the resistances of enemies for your breath weapon. So that's cool. You can use Overwhelm to reduce enemy resistances to your breath weapon. I don't remember if overwhelming energy is... Yeah, it has to be equal to your level, because that's normal. Your level of resist. And this powers up overwhelming energy to be twice your level. So I think this is... Not only does this give you a new functionality, it boosts up a previous functionality you had. So this is a pretty amazing spell. Well, amazing feat that boosts your meta magic. That's really cool. Psychic Counter for Astral Dragons. You roll a critical success against an opponent's mental spell that targets you. Specifically targeting out, you have to roll a critical success, not get a critical success. So that immediately reduces the power of this feat. This is interesting. It's basically when an enemy hits you with a mental spell that only that targets you, which means it can't target an area. It has to target specific single targets, which is probably a lot of mental spells, actually. And you roll a critical success, then you get to automatically attack them with their own spell. And it uses either your DC or their DC, whichever is higher. So that's pretty cool. It's because you're affecting them with it and getting the best of that effect you can. I would say this is I don't know whether I like this or the 120-foot counteract one better, even though this is a lot higher level. I mean, this is cooler for the final result, but it's far less useful because you have to roll a crit on something that was specifically targeting you. But that's definitely cool. Stop it. Here we go. Return fire. Prerequisites: manipulate flames. A creature within 100 feet casts a fire spell, or a fire spell otherwise comes into effect from a source within 100 feet. You attempt to wrest control of that spell. This is what makes red dragons freaking monstrous. Even if you don't pick up any of the spells in here, picking up manipulate flames and then return fire is fantastically thematic for a red dragon. Because it's like, oh, if you cast a fire spell, any spell that has the fire tag on it, not just fire damage, but anything that has the fire tag on it, you just go, oh, I countered it. It's mine now. I didn't snuff it out like a counterspell. I didn't return it directly to you like a reflection ability. I took control of it, and now I can do whatever the hell I want with this spell. Were you shooting a fireball at me, or raising a volcano under my feet, or, you know, casting meteor shower on me? It's like, oh, well, I take all of that, and I throw the fireball at your caster. Or I make the volcano erupt under the middle of your frickin' party. Or I drop the meteor shower on each individual person in your group. It's so damn good. That's so good. Yeah. And it kind of makes you wonder, is like, what other stuff could Mark have made for like all these dragons to give them stuff like this? It's like amazingly, ridiculously cool abilities like that. It's like, why don't silver dragons get the ability to take ice spells, or cloud dragons the ability to take lightning spells and all this other stuff, you know? Like, I really hope that he keeps putting out more feats for dragons, because especially for the dragon mage, it needs more, because there's so many cool things that could be in there. That's a ravager thing, I'm pretty sure. Alrighty. Here is the second reason for anybody and everybody to get this archetype. Living Breath. And it's like, yes, it's an 18th level spell. You're probably not ever going to be in a game that gets that far. But if you're actually playing an AP to the end, then pick this up. It's too good not to. You breathe out your breath weapon. It does its thing. And you can't use Lingering Breath on this because this is also a meta breath, and they take actions, so you can't combine them together. Also, all meta activities, even if you get them as free actions, can't be combined because they say the next thing you do has to be this or it doesn't work. So you can't combine this with anything else. You breathe out your breath weapon, it does its damage, and then it coalesces into a living creature. Like a creature like an elemental. It basically forms into an elemental of your breath weapon type, and you get to sustain it like a spell, and it moves around, doing damage every round that you sustain it for 1 minute. It's a 10 by 10 foot square, so it is possible to hit multiple things with it. And you can move it up to 60 feet, which is freaking ridiculous. And it does 10d6 damage. 10d6 damage is not huge, but that's a lot of damage for you hit somebody with your breath weapon, and then it sticks around. hitting them every round. Like 60 feet, that's easily 2 move actions from most medium creatures. Anything that has a fly speed is going to be gone. You'll never hit them with anything, period. But bigger, slower enemies, you're going to be able to hit them reliably with this every single round. So you're going to be spending an action every round to sustain this to do nice damage. It is so friggin' good. And especially if you were a spellcaster to begin with and you get effortless concentration, this is just free damage. Just free damage. You can cast a 2 or 3 action spell and still get this free damage. You can cast Wall of Stone on some poor schmuck and then have them stuck in your breath weapon for up to a frickin' minute. It is so good. But sadly, at the same level, you get Master Spellcasting, which you also want. Scintillating Spell. Your spells become a radiant display of light and color. If your next action is to cast a spell that doesn't have the darkness trait, has no duration, and requires a creature to make a reflex save, the spell explodes in a spray of scintillating lights. In fact, in addition to its other effects, each creature that failed its reflex save against the spell becomes dazzled for 1 round or blinded for 1 round on a crit failure. I think that's way too high in level for what it does. Because dazzled for a round on any of your non-darkness spells, like it's alright. It's great to have well, it's not even a free rider because it's a meta magic. So, yeah. Too high in level for what it does. But it's not bad. If you're not using any of your other meta magics that actually do and change things, then it's a meta magic that has a chance of doing something. I think that's the key issue here, is you're spending an action to get a chance to do something. Oh, Ravager. And this is the final reason to go into this. Draconic Meta Magician. You've reached the apex of your attunement to magic. The draconic meta magic that takes other dragon mages such effort is as natural to you as breathing. You can use meta magic single actions from your dragon mage feats or single actions from your dragon mage feats that have an effect if your next action is dragon breath. So this is all your meta magics. Your meta magic and your meta breath feats are all free actions. It's fantastic. It's more free actions. If you're a spellcaster and you get effortless concentration plus draconic meta magician, you're freeing up 2 actions a round to do other stuff with, to layer on your spells and damage or effects, to just be decent at actually spellcasting like you should have been from the start. But yes, this is cool. Many other classes get their action economy bumps at lower levels. Most martials do. You have to wait until the end of the freaking game because the devs of Pathfinder were terrified of spellcasting being powerful when they started making the system. And so they made it really, really weak. Echoing Spell. I'm much less of a fan of this one. It's meta magic that makes it so that when you cast a spell of 4th level or lower, you can cast it again at the end of your next turn. For free. It's a 4th level spell. Who gives a fuck? Like, seriously. This is the kind of shit where you could just pull out a wand and cast that shit. It's such a nothing burger that I don't understand. Like, if you have 2 people in your party who desperately need haste in a fight, then you could cast haste the first round and then the second round with only using 1 spell slot. But it's still wasting so much freaking time. That's 2 rounds of yours that are gone just casting a low-level fucking spell. This is so inefficient of your action economy that you might as well just drop out of the fucking party. Like, it's so bad. It just irritates me. If that was like 6 level spells, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. That actually gives you some stuff to work with. Not a lot, but a little. Like, so much of Pathfinder 2 is built on, if you're not casting spells from your highest or second highest level, then they drop off in effectiveness so fast that unless they're doing an evergreen effect like haste, then they're not worth using. And a lot of things, summoning or anything with the incapacitation trait, it has to be at your highest level spell slot, or it will not be effective or work at all. At all. And that's just, those spells suck ass. Because they're made for monsters. Because monsters always get that benefit, and players don't. Well, at least boss monsters. Because even regular monsters, if they're a level lower you, all of their friggin' incapacitation effects are just free crit saves for you, which sucks. I understand that incapacitate is supposed to help make you feel so that, oh, these super powerful spells aren't save or suck at any level, but I think it's too drastic what it does. There's too much, cast this at the highest level or it sucks. Like, you're not going to cast a level 3 fireball when you cast a level 5 spell. Its damage will be too low. It will not affect a battle. And that just sucks. And all the rest of that is Dragon Ravager. So Dragon Mage, there it is. Very, very few feats for it, which sucks. It's more, you know, spellcasters are the redheaded stepchild in Pathfinder 2. They don't get much love. But the stuff they get is really good here. It's really good. Especially red dragons. Red dragons just, ace. So, be a red dragon spellcaster with free archetype. Pick up a lot of these things and just be an absolute beast. And that is all for now. See you in the next one.